constantly my DMs were flooded saying, why haven't you said anything? Why haven't you said anything? Why haven't you said anything? Constantly my comments were flooded with, this is why I don't like you. You've lost my respect. And I was really taken aback, like, what is going on? Like, who is this guy? And why do people hate me for not talking about him? And as I've processed, some things are clear, some things are not. What's clear is that we're dead in the middle of a culture war, and the enemy is having a field day. What do we do as Christians? What we're doing, unfortunately, is we're choosing sides in a culture war. If people are functioning in a way that accomplishes the agenda of Jesus by means that don't look like Jesus, is that Christian? Is it Jesus by any means necessary? Now, here's what you don't know. I've only shared this with a couple people, actually. The day I found out about his murder.
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.
Oh, hey there. I'm Lecrae. Now, I know you probably think this is going to be a podcast episode for The Deep End, but it's not. So for all of you who are planning on swimming in the deep end, come a little closer. What you may not know is that I'm a rapper. And if you didn't know I was a rapper, you may have never been to any of my shows. So when I go on tour, you might see a little bit of this. Or you might see a little bit of that. It'll be a good time. Because, I'm a rapper.
I only think I do this for the pesos. I just preach the message, I can't say so.
You may know or not know that I did not have a prepared statement after the murder and assassination of Charlie Kirk. Because of that, people felt as if I had chosen a side because I didn't say something. They felt as if I had spoken about other things, but not spoken about this. And so I had engaged in my, decision of where I stood. And I did say something, right? Now, first of all, let me make it clear. I didn't know Charlie. I never met him. I'd only heard of him when he had falsely accused me of campaigning for Raphael Warnock, which that's a longer story. And I understand why he would have accused me of that in hindsight. It wasn't the case, but I get why he was led to that conclusion. But outside of that, I didn't know the guy, didn't know much about him. His clips never really hit my algorithm. So when he was murdered, which was a tragedy, and a terrible thing. I wasn't, number one, I was in Africa, so it didn't hit my algorithm or my news feed as quickly as it hit others. And then number two, I just didn't feel as if I needed to say anything. I was kind of like, man, that's messed up. Why do we keep killing each other? Political violence is senseless. But constantly, my DMs were flooded saying, why haven't you said anything? Why haven't you said anything? Why haven't you said anything? Constantly my comments were flooded with, this is why I don't like you. You've lost my respect. And I was really taken aback. Like, what is going on? Like, who is this guy? And why do people hate me for not talking about him? So I did a little digging and little researching, and I realized that, man, he was a polarizing figure. People loved and endeared him and saw him as, a saint and a champion of their views, and people hated and reviled him and saw him as a very divisive individual. And so I did not give a statement, right? Because I just saw that. Now, here's what you don't know. Here's what you do not know. I've only shared this with a couple people, actually. The day I found out about his murder, I was one of the unfortunate people who saw the video popped up as I was researching. I went to bed that night, and I'm in I believe I was in Zimbabwe at the time. We left Zimbabwe, got into South Africa. I went to bed that night, and in the middle of the night, I woke up with severe stomach cramp. And I thought to myself, oh, shoot, I might have gotten some kind of, foodborne virus, or who knows what happened. And so I'm like, man, as I wake up, and I'm hesitant to say this because this is not like, I'm not that type of person. As I wake up, I had a vision. I'm awake. It's not a dream. It's literally like my mind is overtaken by a vision. It was like the room turned purple, and the room turns purple, and I see Charlie Kirk being assassinated, blood, coming out of his body. And I heard what to me was the voice of demons laughing. And, it was like in an instant, and then it was like the curtain closed, and then the room went back to regular color, and it freaked me out. I'm not saying that because I had the dream that, Charlie was a martyr. I'm not saying that because I had the dream that, I have the full understanding of it all. I just know I had a crazy, not dream, vision, because I was awake. I've never had this experience in my life. What I believe it was an acknowledgement that this is not just a physical fight, that there's spiritual warfare going on. And it was like God opened up the curtains for me to see behind the scenes. The scripture says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and darkness. And it was like God opened up the curtains for me to see behind the scenes, like, oh, there's a spiritual battle happening back here. Now, I don't have an interpretation of what that means. I don't have an interpretation of exactly like why I had the dream or what God wanted me to get from it, other than to realize this was spiritual. Freaked me out because I come from a pretty theologically conservative background, and that type of stuff just doesn't happen. But this also is happening the day after I'm talking to a very conservative pastor in Africa who's telling me that the supernatural occurrences in this continent are just more frequent because people are used to it, because people are not objective, because we're not, it's a norm. People use witch doctors and see, practice sacraments, and there's lots of syncretism that happens. And so it happened to me while I was there, and I was open to it because I'd had this conversation with this man. So the next day I did post a video, and I said, hey, I have to process this. There's smarter people about the subject of Charlie Kirk than me. I don't understand what he meant to the culture. I don't understand why he was killed. I don't understand the spiritual implications of what's happening. So I got to process. And as I've processed, some things are clear, some things are not. I'll tell you what's clear. What's clear is that we're dead in the middle of a culture war. And the enemy is having a field day. Left versus right, red versus blue, progressives versus conservatives. And oftentimes Christians are told to pick a side in the midst of this. Or they're told that there's only one side in the midst of this. And if you're not on that side, you may not even really be a Christian. I think this is problematic in a lot of ways. And I think that we haven't really wrestled with this in a healthy way. And the enemy wins. This idea of culture war came from a book that came out in like 91, talking about, Nietzsche's views on, resentment and tension. And in this book, there's mention that people will be so diametrically opposed to each other's views that violence would ensue. Like people will think that I so much disagree with you that violence would ensue. And that's one of the things that I believe it's back to Cain and Abel. It's that I'm so upset at what's happening here that my only result is to eliminate you. And now I think there's real dangers of us being so frustrated at each other that we take each other's lives, which is satanic and demonic. Hey, listen, y'all, mental health is a very big, important thing for me, and I hope it's important for you. There are a lot of Christians who spend years carrying around unnecessary guilt. They're convinced they're failing God. The truth is, what they're really battling is something that's extremely different. It's called religious OCD. Now, what this does is it shows up in countless ways. Maybe you sit down to pray and you thought, did I say the right way? Should I start this prayer over? What if God won't forgive me? Or what if I miss a word? Or maybe right in the middle of worship, a blasphemous thought just flashes in your mind and it leaves you shaken up and you're wondering if you just sinned by even thinking about it. Now, while OCD is usually stereotyped as a neat freak behavior, the truth is OCD attaches itself to what matters most to you. I mean, salvation itself can become wrapped up in doubt and fear. But the good news is that this is not the end of your story. Religious OCD is real, it's common, and with the right help, it's highly treatable. And that's where NOCD comes in. So NOCD is the world's leading provider of OCD treatment, with therapists who specialize in exposure and response prevention therapy. They're the gold standard for treatment in OCD. The therapists don't just understand OCD, they also understand how deeply your faith matters. You get live virtual sessions where they're gonna walk with you as you learn and break free from OCD's grip while keeping your faith at the center. NOCD is covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans, and they even provide support between sessions so you never have to face this alone. If any of this sounds familiar, don't wait. Head over to NOCD.com, book a free 15-minute call with their team, and start reclaiming your faith from OCD today. That's NOCD.com, NOCD.com. I think both sides in this culture war have some valid points, right? There is dangers of a moral drift on one side, and there are dangers of mixing the kingdom with the empire and too much political power. There are dangers of the less fortunate being seen as trash and the ability to throw them away. So the question is, what do we do as Christians, right? What do we do? What we're doing, unfortunately, is we're choosing sides in a culture war, right? That's what we're doing. And I have to ask, are we supposed to, right? Is that the way of Jesus? Should Christians be involved? Obviously, we should be involved in society and involved in decisions that affect our nation. I think you look at someone like William Wilberforce, right? He had to stand up and fight against what was happening in society, but he didn't do it by trying to destroy the other side, right? There was a unique way he fought in that process. And then I think about the church in the civil rights era, though they're not perfect, but they didn't shy away and say, well, God will take care of it. Let's not get involved. So there's definitely room to be involved as the culture wars over moral issues, over things like prayer in schools or civil rights. Like there's a space for us to have involvement. But what exactly does that look like, and how do we go about it? Do we fight with the weapons of the empire? Do we smash our enemies? Or do we embody the kingdom of Jesus, who fights completely differently? You know, the kingdom of Jesus doesn't look like the left or the right, regardless of what people may say. It looks like Christ. You know, I'm at risk of going on tangents and not staying on topic, but let me go on a tangent for a second. If people are functioning in a way that accomplishes the agenda of Jesus by means that don't look like Jesus, is that Christian? Like, is it Christian? Is it Jesus by any means necessary? Is it God's way by any means necessary? Like if the government is overrun by, let's just say, Islam, and there are Islamic views that are anti-biblical, anti-Christian as it's being fleshed out in our society, is it okay to kill the Islamic leaders in power in order to make sure that Christian agendas or God's agenda takes place in our society? Is that Christian? Right? Is that what Jesus would have done? That's how the Crusades took place. And people look back on that and say, no, that was not the way it should have been done. So I think even if you look at Jesus' time in first century Rome, you look at Christ, right? And you got these caricatures of people in that time period. You got the Pharisees who are purity at all costs, like cut them down, kill them, do whatever to make sure purity of the truth of the Torah happens, right? You have the Sadducees who are, let's just integrate with the politics so we can have power and bring about what God wants, what the Torah says. Let's integrate so we have political power. Then you got the Zealots who are like revolution, cut off Rome's head, kill them, and take over God's way, right? You got these three kind of characters, and I think we still have them today. We got the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Zealots who feel like this is the way things should be done. You got people who want a revolution, who want to terrorize. You got people who are purists, and at all costs, they're going to fight for that. And you got people who say, if we can get some political power, we can bring God's agenda to fruition. But Jesus doesn't fully align with any of them, right? That's not the page Jesus is on. Jesus, he critiques them all. He has some pretty harsh critiques for some of them. You look at Peter, who's functioning like a zealot, and he pulls out his sword. And what does Jesus say? He says, put the sword away, Pete. You know, those who live by the sword die by the sword. We're not going for a revolution, but Rome is about to take over. Peter, put the sword away. That's not how we're going to handle this. You got Pilate, you know, who Jesus says, you know what? My kingdom's not of this world. Like, listen, if it were, my servants would fight, but this isn't my kingdom. I don't think we can say that. I think we struggle with saying my kingdom's not of this world, right? We're saying that, no, this nation is our kingdom in some senses. And I'm not saying you don't protect the nation and protect the people within it. What I am saying is that the nation is the empire. You cannot exalt empire over nation. Empire wants uniformity. Kingdom wants unity. Rome would do anything for uniformity. You're going to be Romans. You're going to speak like we want you to speak, act like we want you to act. You're going to comply, or it's off with your head. That's what the empire does. Kingdom says we want unity. We want every nation, every tongue, every tribe to have, you know, their unique voices and views, but functioning in a way that is God honoring. I mean, you got Jesus talking to the crowds who says, render to Caesar what's his. Like, give him his stuff. Jesus is not patriotic to Rome, and he doesn't satisfy Rome's patriotism, and he doesn't satisfy the Pharisees' hatred of the powers of Rome when he says, render to Caesar what's Caesar's. Well, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on, Jesus? My Father's side. I think in the empire, the logic there is to secure power, is to control the narrative, is to silence your enemies, and is to win at all costs. It's win, win, win. In war, empire believes that it's not who's right, it's who's left. What I mean by that is it doesn't matter who's right, who's left when the war is over. We just need to make sure we win. We're not going to critique our side. We're not going to have accountability. We're not going to challenge our side's views because we don't want the other side to see our weaknesses. What a lot of Christians say as far as getting involved in a culture war, the example they use is Jesus turning over tables, right? He's a table flipper. That's what he'd do. But those weren't Rome's tables. Right? Jesus had some harsh critiques, but that's when he was cleaning house. That's when he was dealing with his own. And that's what we don't do in the culture war. You rarely hear people critique their own and say, no, we're messing up here. We got to cut that out, right? We're not going to be violent. We're not going to be arrogant. We're not going to be divisive. We're not going to be hateful. We're going to be caring and we're going to be loving. You don't hear us challenging ourselves that way, right? We're trying to challenge the other side. It's like, where do they do that? Like, you think about a professional football team and the coach is so afraid of the opposing team knowing, weaknesses that he doesn't chastise his own team in the locker room. We don't get in the locker room and challenge each other like, hey, this is unacceptable. Coaches do that. The opposite team saw you miss the tackle, right? They probably know you're going to berate the person who missed the tackle in the locker room. But how crazy would it be for a coach to say, I'm not going to say anything because I want the other team to not think, we have any issues. That's ridiculous. There's the empire logic, which is win at all costs. And then there's the kingdom logic, which is about faithfulness, which is about fruit. Right? What is the fruit of the Spirit? It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, goodness. That's the fruit of the Spirit. It's not divisive. It doesn't keep record of wrongs. It is loving. It assumes the best. What did Jesus do when he was persecuted? He said to pray for your enemies. He said, blessed are those who are persecuted for my name's sake. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, curse those who persecute us. Kill them, fight them, go to war against them. And it makes us look crazy as the church when we're jumping on the bandwagon of a culture war. God has not called us to pick a team, right? He's called us to be a community within the chaos that points people to a different way. Like, the challenge is that some of us believe that we're here on earth, the church is here on earth, and I don't know where you'll find this in the scriptures. If you find it, let me know. Some of us believe that the church is here on earth to literally create a sustainable utopia on the planet. Like, we're here to change this culture to a utopian Christian nation. I don't see that. Like, Jesus didn't come to do that while he was here. But you will see in the scriptures that Jesus calls his church to look like him in the midst of the chaos, to be a picture of something distinct and alternative and challenging, but in a loving way. The Christian way is not to crush your enemies and to war against them. The Christian way is to invite, is to welcome. It's to say, hey, we don't agree, but let me show you a better way. Let me extend to you the opportunity to see how this can be different. And I'm not saying there's not room to push back on things. The civil rights pushed back on Jim Crow, but not in a destructive way, right? In a very peaceful, loving way that compelled people to see, wow, this is wrong. I think that's the way of Christ. I think that's the way of the kingdom. The kingdom says, even if you're persecuted, you're blessed. The empire says, win the election or lose everything, right? The kingdom says every tribe, every tongue, every nation will bow. The empire says, make everybody like us. The kingdom says we should unify. The empire says we need to be uniform. And when you're participating in a culture war, in the way that the culture is, you're acting like the empire and not like the kingdom. Hold up. I know you're in the middle of watching something great, but I got to talk to you, okay? A lot of people talk about self-care, but you know what they don't talk about? They don't talk about credit care. Before you think, oh, here he goes again, some other ad. No, listen, let's be real. Your credit score is a huge part of your life. So if you're not sure where you need to start, I'm trying to help you. I needed the help, so let me give you some help. I need to tell you about Ava. Now, Ava is something that I wish existed when I needed information about credit care. What Ava is a credit building app that makes it super easy for you to improve your credit and fast. So what you can do is you can get better rates on loans, you can pay off your debt faster, and you can keep more money in your pocket. Ava reports your on-time payments to all major credit bureaus every single day, helping you build solid credit history quick. And the longer you stick with Ava, the higher your score can go. So it's $8 a month. And what do you get for $8 a month? You get access to all of Ava's credit building tools. Ava's gonna keep it low stress, low cost, and super, super transparent. Take control of your credit. Download the Ava app. It's spelled AVA. Download it today. And when you join, use my promo code Lecrae, and you know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you your first month totally free. So get the Ava app. Use my promo code Lecrae so they know you heard it from me, and you get your first month from Ava absolutely free. Promo code Lecrae, and shout out to Ava. Now go get yourself some good credit. All right, y'all, my life is busy. I don't have time to do dinner like I like to do dinner, okay? When dinner time hits, your fridge is full of question marks. We gotta stop with the last minute grocery store runs and trying to piece together a meal full of random leftovers. We need to eat healthy, we need to eat better, and that's why ButcherBox is delivering better meat right where you need it. All right, they have over 100 premium protein choices straight to your door. I'm talking about 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, pork that's raised crate-free, and wild-caught seafood. They have a great reputation. For like nearly a decade, ButcherBox has led the industry with meat and seafood that's antibiotic-free, hormone-free, independently verified. Let me tell you what I love, though. I love that they meet the high standard, because I got a high standard. If we're talking about filet mignon, or we're talking about like dinner with kid-friendly chicken nuggets, they have it. And this is the best part. You can pick from the curated boxes and customize your own to match your family's needs, because my family is all over the place. So listen, whether you're feeding a growing family or you're just trying to eat clean without the stress, ButcherBox offers curated and fully customizable plans that are going to fit your schedule and your preference. ButcherBox is also committed to doing things right, from how the animals are raised to supporting workers and reducing environmental impact. So here's the deal. Exclusive offer. All my listeners are going to get free protein in every box for a year, plus $20 off your first box. So do this. Go to butcherbox.com/Lecrae. That's it. All right. That's where the deal is going to be at. All right. You get a limited time offer. It's free shipping all the time. One more time, I'm going to tell y'all, butcherbox.com/Lecrae. Do not forget to use the link so they know we sent you. Love. I think some ways we can engage is to pray, right? I think we think prayer is for weaklings. I think we think prayer is this like dismissive, uninvolved form of battle. When God himself says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual. How do you fight demonic powers? What do you have? What do you think you can do? Like, you need supernatural power to fight supernatural. You're gonna have to call on the power of the Spirit, the power of God. So I think we dismiss prayer. Prayer is important. It's a very important part of the battle in this culture war that a lot of us are embroiled in. Like, how do we engage the culture war? We pray. We pray. Prayer transforms things. I'm a product of prayer. We speak truth. We don't water down the scriptures. We don't back away from what we know is true. Hey, we believe abortion is killing children. We say that. But we don't burn people at the cross because they disagree with us on it. We don't do that. We serve. You know, one of the most beautiful things that I've seen are people outside of abortion clinics who lovingly offer alternative resources and say, hey, can we meet with you? Can we talk with you? Can we talk to you about adoption? Can we help you? And these same people, after these women come out from having had an abortion, still show them the same love and respect and say, hey, there's aftercare programs, there's therapy we have for you. That is a kingdom way. It's not disengaged from the culture, but it's not in an embroiled war chastising and embarrassing and dehumanizing people for the sake of making their point. That's not the way of Jesus. I think we need to model unity. America thrives on division. Democrat versus Republican, black versus white, left versus right. And I think the church can model what unity looks like in the midst of chaos. There are multiple expressions of Christianity in America. How beautiful would it have been to see them come together in times of peril, in times of despair, and wrestle, right? If there are people who feel like the right disregards their humanity, can the Christians on the right listen and have conversations? Can the Christians on the left listen and have conversations? And I'm a firm believer that there's no possible way you can be a faithful follower of Christ and not have heavy critiques on each side of the political aisle. It doesn't make any sense. You cannot possibly believe that your side of the aisle is the side that has the monopoly on what the truth of the scripture upholds. You can't. Both of them fall short. So when we begin to co-opt biblical truth and marry it to an empirical political party, we diminish what God has established. We flatten it. We make it less than what it was meant to be. I think about early church history and the Romans leaving babies out to die and Christians coming and adopting those children. That to me is how you engage. The Christians could have said, let's protest, let's fight Rome, there's so many things they could have done, but they got in the trenches and showed something very distinct and beautiful. They adopted these children, which made the outside world say, why would you sacrifice yourself like that? Your freedom, your time, your autonomy for these children that someone else didn't want. That's Jesus, right? That's who God is. And here's just some things that I thought through. Number one, Jesus was not a culture warrior. He was a culture maker, right? He created an alternative culture for people to exist in and to see that neither side liked. The Romans and the Pharisees had issues with him. The Sadducees and the Zealots had issues with him because he was creating an alternative culture and showing people a new way. Jesus excluded the expressions of cultural power. There was no guilt or coercion to get someone to see his perspective. There was love, there was service, there was invitation. He loved the sinner before they even repented. That was his model. That's how he functioned. Christians who engage in culture war run the risk of tarnishing the very truth of Jesus. I think, if I'm being honest, I think this is the divisive issue with the passing of Charlie Kirk. It's because people can't distinguish his Christian faith from his social commentary within a culture war. And because they can't see, like some people see it all as one, some people see a division, and it creates tension. And I think there's a lesson to be learned for a lot of us in this. It's that, the left and the right are not where we hang our hat. The truth of scripture is there should not be a believer on the left who glories in the death of another human being. Shouldn't exist. Shouldn't exist. And at the same time, there should not be a person on the right who would diminish and dehumanize someone who doesn't get why you're mourning, who doesn't understand, who's lost, right? I went through this in 2016. I didn't understand why certain pastors didn't grasp my pain for, a Mike Brown. I didn't get it. Why don't you care? But I wasn't permitted to dehumanize them for not understanding. I wasn't permitted to hate them because they didn't want to post about it, because they had a different vantage point on it, right? I had to learn that. Like, oh, you don't see him like I do. Oh, you have a vantage point and a viewpoint that is very different from mine. How can we lovingly sit down and have a conversation so that you can hear how I see things and I can hear how you see things? End of the day, I just wrote this down, so I'm going to read what I wrote. The church is not a sustained transformation agent of society. It's not. Utopia literally means no place. It doesn't exist. This earth is not our new earth and our new heaven. Doesn't mean we don't push for the kingdom. Doesn't mean we don't push for heaven on earth as it is in heaven. It just means we have an understanding and expectation that it's not going to be taken with violence. Right? People take that verse out of context. The violent take it by force. That's not what Jesus meant. And then lastly, I would just say this, that the church is supposed to be transformed to the image of Jesus in a very visible counterculture in the midst of a culture war that is attractive and is providing an alternative for people. People within this culture war should see us and say, wow, how? What is that? Evidence of this is me having a discussion with, Corey Ruth and Justin Giboney, who are on two different sides of the political aisle, and they have civil conversations sitting here, dialoguing, praying, laughing, disagreeing, but not to the point of violence. It's condemnable. And I'll say this is not a virtue signal. This is not an opportunity for me to say, hey, I hope I'm in your good graces. This is me saying I sincerely hate, condemn, and despise the fact that somebody would murder another human being for their difference of perspective. I think it's demonic, it's satanic. And I grieve for the family of Charlie Kirk. I do. I think it's heinous. And this is a man who said, I should never step foot in another church in America. Does not diminish his humanity. It does not diminish his imago Dei. And it does not invite me to take a side in a culture war. It encourages me to hold on to Jesus more and to say, you know what? Even if we disagree, you are made in the image of God. And if maybe we can sit down and have discussions, maybe we can sit down and hear each other's perspectives. But if we're at the place where we're at each other's throat over our differences, the empire's winning. And Satan would love for the empire to win over the kingdom. That's all I got.
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.
What's going on, Deep End community? Hey, listen, I just wanted to remind you all, if you guys want to enjoy these episodes early, you can audibly. Wherever you can listen to a podcast, whether that's your Spotify, your Apple, your Amazon, The Deep End actually releases Thursdays at 5 a.m. there. Also, if you're in the gym or you're on your commute, this is an easy way to stream it on those particular platforms. So you want to listen to it early, or you want to listen to it in your commute or at the gym, make sure you go listen to the podcast wherever podcasts are audibly streamed.